The well-being of indigenous people and the earth was disrupted by Western colonizers. They used brutal and inhumane efforts that separated indigenous people from their culture, their history, and language, separated them from the land, and imposed economic practices that have proven to be so much less equitable and sustainable.
One of the most pivotal movements that pushed us to where we're at was the implementation around early 1900, 1910, 1915, was the federal government, along with the help with different churches, different denominations, came to our reservation with the sole mission to educate our children in Western settler colonial education in English. That was a moment in our history that has impacted us and is still impacting us now.
Today we're reeling from hundreds of years of children being taken away. So the boarding school era, the federal government established boarding schools where children were, rations were withheld from people if they wouldn't give up their children. In the 1950s, the transracial adoption program was created by the federal government, and hundreds of children removed, and then the government trained the states how to do that, and so thousands of children were removed from their families. No due process, no court hearings, just the government coming in, taking away children. Today, we still have the worst disproportionality in foster care placement. 17% of the children in Alaska are Native Alaskan, or Alaska Native, and 60% of the children in foster care system up there are Alaska Native.
At one time, in 1800, we had 60 million plus buffalo in the Great Plains area. They were vast, they were abundant, and they were the lifeblood for the people that lived in this part of the world. Through very specific policies, there was an intentional effort by the government to wipe out the buffalo. The reason was buffalo were everything to us. People understood that if the buffalo were taken away, that our ability to be self-sufficient would no longer exist, and we would be forced to come on to reservations and be forced to be reliant upon the government. And what happened is that by 1900, there were less than 1,000 free-roaming buffalo. We went from 60 million plus to less than 1,000 in 100 years.
Indigenous people own 5% of this country's land base. Globally, indigenous people own 28% of the Earth's land surface. The amount of resources, and 80% of the biodiversity is on our land. We should be the richest people around by economic law. So what is this if it's not the fact that our assets are taken, converted into cash for them, or the benefit of the asset is derived and directed to them? We might still own the Colorado River, but they've diverted the water.
Prior to the Civil War, Mississippi was the richest state in the Union. It was the richest on the base of slave labor. Cotton was still king, right? At that particular period in time, on a global scale, not just within the United States, but on a global scale. All this was very much tied to this kind of triangular trade. And because of the value of the human bodies that they possessed and the products that they were producing, it was the richest state by far. Those terms of those relations, the unequal nature of the relation between who owns, who doesn't own, right? Who can be represented, who's not represented. That still remains in place in Mississippi. And it's that backdrop that we are, now some 150 something years later, still chipping away at and trying to undermine and eradicate. That is what our program fundamentally is based upon and what we're trying to accomplish.
Unfortunately, we live in an anti-Black, white supremacist, capitalist country, so that any efforts, especially by subaltern people like African Americans, to take charge of their own economics, to create some economic democracy and some wealth on their own is frowned upon. Yes. Because basically white supremacists, are making money off of exploiting Blacks. So throughout the history between the mutual aid societies and the actual co-ops, right, blacks are trying to get out from under that exploitation, whether it's through job or whether it's through buying from businesses, buying supplies or whatever. So when blacks started doing this stuff and succeeding, the white folks not having it. So that, so the what I call the sabotage really runs the range of just, underpricing them to, underpricing the blacks so they have to go out of business, not letting the white banks lend them money, the railroads not taking their produce, so lower level sabotage, insurance companies not insuring, but then they also went as far as lynching, burning down the co-ops, lynching. In fact, I looked at some of the lynching data that somebody like Ida B. Wells put together, and she was one of the ones who actually said that most lynching was about economics, not about sex. Most of the blacks were male business people who were making, who were landowners or business owners trying to stop independent black economic activity. And so they would burn down the buildings, lynch people, hound people. So I have examples of even massacres